And we're joined now by Erick Langer. He's a professor of Latin American history at Georgetown University right here in Washington, D.C. Professor, welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
So President Obama trying to normalize relations, but critics are now wondering at what cost to the Cuban people?
Well, I think that's something that's really interesting to see. Do, in fact, the Cubans get more political liberties or not? And then, of course, there's the economic question. The economic question is that, in fact, the embargo remains in place and will remain in place because certainly under President Trump and under Republicans, even some Democrats who feel that the embargo should remain as long as Cuba remains a dictatorship.
So the Trump administration has made it tougher, as we've been talking about, for Americans to visit and also do business there in hopes of pressuring Cuba to bend or blink to some of these humanitarian concerns. Is this a good strategy?
It's really hard to tell. Embargoes usually don't work very well, but Cuba is in a situation right now in which its major benefactor, which has been Venezuela, is in such economic trouble that it really can't help Cuba very much anymore. Now, the Russians are stepping up at this point, so we don't really know where this is going. But generally speaking, embargoes don't really work very well.
The Cuban people are clearly suffering. I mean, their businesses are suffering, the hotels are suffering, the restaurants where there was perceived to be somewhat of a boom. Is it a situation where they need to take two steps back, I should say, to take a step forward?
Yes, I think potentially that's the case. But again, I think Cuba at this point, is really like it was before, rather than really losing as much as it had during the special period when the Soviet Union collapsed. So I don't think this is a crisis yet. Certainly they're suffering, and certainly there are problems right now in terms of the Cubans getting the business from Americans that they had hoped to get.
The Trump administration obviously pulling staff out of the embassy there and vice versa here in Washington. Was this the right move?
I think, I think the real problem is why. And there were these issues, these medical issues apparently with some kind of a sonic issue, but we don't really know where that's coming from nor what that was, and thus whether it was the Cubans who did that or not. And so it really depends on what the cause was. And since we don't know the cause, I don't even think the US administration knows that, and the Cuban government says it doesn't know it either, it's really hard to tell. If this was intentional, that of course is a serious diplomatic breach.
How do you think things should play out from here?
Well, my sense is that embargoes don't work. And I think if you think about it, if you have in spring break, 1 million US college kids going to Cuba, things will change relatively rapidly. But as long as there's restriction, what it really does is mainly give power to a small elite of Florida politicians of Cuban origin, and that's about it. And I think that's really what's here at stake.
Because the politics with Marco Rubio in
exactly.
Florida.
And also mainly in Florida, but obviously even some Democrats such as Bob Menendez of New Jersey, who wants to become again the leader of the Democrats on the Foreign Relations Committee.
All righty. Well, Professor Erick Langer, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.